When the king of basketball met the king of sports talk, the internet exploded. It started like any other heated sports debate, a few sharp words, a little ego, and a headline that refused to die. But this time, it wasn't just about basketball, it was about pride legacy and the fine line between being a father and being a brand. LeBron James, a man who's built an empire out of greatness, suddenly found himself in the middle of a storm, not because of a playoff loss or a bad trade, but because of his son. On the other side stood Stephen A. Smith, the loudest voice in sports media, a man unafraid to call out anyone, even LeBron James himself. What began as a critique about Bronny James's early struggles in the NBA quickly spiraled into something far more personal. Stephen A. didn't whisper his opinion, he dropped it like a grenade. He said what millions were thinking, but too afraid to say that LeBron might be chasing his own dream through his son. That line cut deep. Because for LeBron, Bronny isn't just a player, he's the living continuation of everything the king built. And as fans watched the feud unfold in real time, the tension was electric. It wasn't just an argument between two powerful men, it was a cultural moment. Everyone had a side. Some saw LeBron as a protective father standing up for family. Others saw an aging superstar unable to handle criticism. Then came Charles Barkley, the wild card no one saw coming. The Hall of Famer stepped in swinging, and suddenly this wasn't just about Bronny anymore. It became a generational clash, old-school grit versus modern-day image. And beneath all the noise, one question lingered: is this really about Bronny, or about LeBron's legacy itself? Before the headlines and the shouting matches, there was a debut, one that felt less like an introduction and more like a spotlight burning hot from the moment Bronny James stepped on an NBA floor. 13 games in, and reality hit hard. The stat line didn't whisper, it screamed. 0.3 points, 0.3 assists, 0.4 rebounds, 1 made shot out of 16 attempts, 0 for 7 from beyond the arc. Numbers that would barely be mentioned for any other rookie, but Bronny isn't any rookie. He's LeBron's son. And that's a blessing that can feel like a curse. Every dribble, every shot, every second on the court, all of it dissected, replayed, and judged like he was already supposed to be a superstar. Most players enter the league quietly learning in the shadows, building confidence brick by brick. Bronny entered with the weight of an empire on his shoulders, a last name heavier than a championship trophy, and a world ready to compare him to a legend before he even tied his shoes. LeBron knew it too. No father wants to watch their kids struggle, especially not under the brightest lights in sports. And when the criticism started rolling in the memes, the jokes, the disbelief, the king felt every blow like it was landing on his own career. To him, this wasn't just a rookie trying to find his rhythm. This was his son, his legacy, and the story he spent 2 decades writing suddenly being judged through rookie stats and highlight reels gone wrong. The world wasn't just watching Bronny, they were waiting to see if the dynasty could continue. And for LeBron, silence wasn't an option. Because as the whispers grew louder, all it took was one comment to light the fuse. It all started with one of those classic Stephen A. Smith moments, loud, passionate, and impossible to ignore. Sitting under studio lights, he leaned forward and fired off the take that shook the NBA world. LeBron's chasing his own dream through Bronny. It wasn't said with malice. It was said with that mix of honesty and frustration that only Stephen A. can deliver, the kind that cuts deep because it's not entirely wrong. His point was simple. Bronny James isn't ready for the NBA spotlight yet. He should have been in the G League learning the grind, developing his game away from the noise. That's where real growth happens, in silence, not under cameras. But Stephen didn't stop there. He called out the pattern, LeBron's lifelong habit of scripting his own story. From the decision to the I'm coming home era, everything about LeBron's career has been cinematic. And now to Stephen, it looked like he was trying to write one final chapter, the father and son legacy moment, even if it meant forcing a story that wasn't ready to be told. He warned LeBron, "You're not doing Bronny any favors by keeping him under this kind of spotlight. The kid's trying to breathe, but you've turned every breath into a headline." Online chaos erupted. Half the internet applauded Stephen for saying what others wouldn't, that sometimes even greatness needs to step back. The other half dragged him for daring to question a father's love. It wasn't hate versus loyalty, it was truth versus perception, and both sides thought they were right. But one thing was clear, Stephen A.'s words hit a nerve. And LeBron James, the man who built his career on control, wasn't about to let that slide quietly. It happened under the bright lights of a Lakers home game, a place where LeBron James has written some of his most iconic moments. But this time, it wasn't about a buzzer beater or a record-breaking night. It was about a confrontation that no one saw coming. Midway through the third quarter, with the cameras rolling and Stephen A. Smith sitting courtside, LeBron walked straight toward him during a timeout. The crowd fell silent. No smiles, no handshakes, just a glare that could slice through noise. Then, with a calm but unmistakably sharp tone, LeBron leaned in and said the words everyone heard, even without a microphone. "Keep my son's name out your mouth." In that instant, the internet went nuclear. Clips flooded Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube within minutes. Fans froze the video frame by frame, analyzing LeBron's expression, Stephen's reaction, and the tension in the air. Some said LeBron crossed a line, bringing real-life anger into what should have been just talk show banter. Others defended him, saying any father would have done the same if someone kept criticizing their kid on national TV. A few days later, LeBron sat down on the Pat McAfee show to set the record straight. He claimed it wasn't about ego, it was about protection. "I'm just defending my family," he said. "Critique me all you want, but don't make it personal." But fans could hear more than words. They heard something underneath the mix of pride, pain, and maybe guilt. The kind that comes from realizing that in trying to protect your legacy, you might be suffocating it. It was no longer about a debate. It was personal. It was emotional. It was war of worlds, and it wasn't over yet. Because then came the voice no one expected. Just when it seemed the storm couldn't get any louder, Charles Barkley's voice cut through the noise like a thunderclap. The round mound of rebound had entered the chat, and he wasn't pulling punches. On live TV, Barkley called it exactly how he saw it: LeBron's acting like a bully. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't joking. He was dead serious. Barkley said LeBron was using his fame and influence to silence people who were simply doing their jobs, offering opinions. "You're too great to be this petty," Barkley added. "You're one of the best to ever touch a basketball man. You don't need to come after Stephen A. like that." To Barkley, this wasn't about ego. It was about principle. He grew up in an era where players earned respect by showing humility, not by controlling narratives. Back then, if you took criticism, you took it like a man, let your game do the talking, and moved on. Barkley's generation lived by a simple code toughness over image. LeBron's world, though, runs on perception, brand deals, PR teams, and perfectly curated storylines. To Barkley, that's where the game, and maybe even LeBron, lost something real. And the internet loved it. Fans called Barkley the last honest man in sports media. Clips of his rants spread like wildfire, while others accused him of being stuck in the past. But one thing was undeniable: when Barkley spoke, people listened. Because behind that booming voice was a deeper frustration, the sense that today's stars care more about controlling the conversation than facing the truth. And as Barkley's words echoed across social media, the debate shifted. This wasn't just about media beef anymore, it was about the system itself. Some dreams sound beautiful until you realize what they cost. For LeBron James, that dream has always been simple: to share an NBA court with his son before he retires. On the surface, it's one of the most touching goals in sports history. A father and son side by side chasing greatness together. But behind that fairy tale, the lines between love and legacy have started to blur. LeBron has never been shy about his intentions. For years, he said he'd play for any team willing to draft Bronny. That declaration turned what could have been a quiet developmental journey into a global spectacle. Overnight, Bronny wasn't just a prospect. He was a storyline, a symbol of his father's unfinished dream. And that's where the pressure became brutal. Every missed shot, every shaky possession wasn't just Bronny's struggle, it was LeBron's reflection. Critics say LeBron's dream, though heartfelt, might be self-serving. That this isn't just about fatherhood, it's about cementing his legacy as more than a player. To be remembered not just as a champion, but as a family man, a figure who transcended basketball. Yet that same ambition has placed Bronny under a microscope no teenager should have to live under. Every dribble is dissected by millions. Every mistake trends online. And no matter how hard he works, his effort is constantly overshadowed by his father's name. LeBron's greatest gift, his fame, has also become his son's greatest burden. Because love, when mixed with legacy, can turn into pressure. And pressure, even for the son of a king, can crush more than it builds. The world keeps asking, is this about family or about control? And yet, the real story might not be about LeBron at all. While the world debates LeBron's motives and the media trades shots over what's right or wrong, one person has quietly stayed out of the spotlight, the kid at the center of it all. Bronny James, the 19-year-old who didn't ask to inherit the crown but was born wearing it anyway. Everywhere he goes, the cameras follow. Every game is analyzed like a championship. Every mistake is magnified. Every success diminished by the same question: Would anyone care if his last name wasn't James? That's the shadow he lives under, a shadow cast by one of the brightest stars in sports history. But away from the noise, those close to Bronny describe something different. A kid who shows up early, stays late, and rarely complains. Someone who works like he's starting from zero, because deep down, he knows that's exactly what people expect him to do. For Bronny, it's not about fame, it's about survival. Each day in the league is a test of endurance, not just of skill, but of identity. He's trying to find his own rhythm, his own reason to belong, not as LeBron's son, but as Bronny James the player. Yet the harder he works, the louder the comparisons get. It's a cruel paradox. The more he fights to step out of his father's shadow, the more that shadow seems to stretch. You can see it in his body language during games, the quiet determination, the frustration behind the calm. He's playing for more than a roster spot. He's playing for the right to be seen as himself. And for the first time, people are starting to wonder maybe this story was never about a father protecting his son. Which brings us to the question no one wants to ask. When the dust settles, what's left isn't just a feud between three giants of the game, it's a reflection of everything that makes greatness both magnetic and messy. LeBron James isn't just a father. He's a billion-dollar brand, a living symbol of ambition, control, and endurance. And that's where the conflict lies, because you can't separate the man from the myth he's built. Charles Barkley's words hit because they came from a place of raw honesty. Stephen A. Smith's critique stung because it carried a kernel of truth. And LeBron's reaction burned because it was fueled by something real: pride, love, and fear all tangled together. In trying to protect his family, LeBron may have done what every great man eventually does. He tried to control his legacy too tightly. Bronny's story isn't finished yet. Maybe he'll find his rhythm, maybe he won't. But what this saga exposed is the cost of living in the shadow of perfection. For all the fame and wealth LeBron faces, something no trophy can fix: the uncertainty of fatherhood under a microscope. And that's what makes this story human. Because greatness builds empires, but it also builds walls. Walls that keep out criticism, but sometimes also keep out truth. And when those walls start to crack, even kings have to face what's inside. So maybe this isn't about basketball at all. Maybe it's about a father doing what he thinks is right, even if the world sees it differently. Or maybe it's about a man defending not just his family, but his throne. What do you think? Was LeBron standing up as a dad, or protecting his legacy as a brand? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe, and stay tuned, because this story is far from over.